folks. We'll get this meeting started. Everyone have a seat. I'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting for the City of Oregon City, Monday, October 28th, 2024. Ms. Newman, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner LaSalle?
Present.
Commissioner Dole?
Here.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Here.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner Laws?
Here.
Vice Chair Espy?
Here.
Chair Stoll?
Here. I'll move on to approval of the minutes. Any discussion or motions for the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 23rd, 2024.
I'll second that. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Vice Chair Espy?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. I'll move on to public comments for items not on the agenda. I have one speaker today, or this evening.
It's been a long time since I've been on this side of the table, but give me a second here. These chairs are always too low. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Denise McGriff, and I'm the Mayor of the City of Oregon City, and I wanted to give you a brief update on the work that I've been doing with the County Commission on the historic Clackamas County Courthouse. As many of you know, the courthouse is being rebuilt. The new one is being built up on Red Soils Court, and that is on property that they plan to build for many, many years. So let's fast forward a couple of years back from that initial discussion in 2017. So about 2 years ago, the Downtown Oregon City Association applied for a Main Street grant to update the geotech, seismic, and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing reports that were done on the courthouse prior to the time that the county started asking the state for money. The city was a partner in that application. And unfortunately, what happened with that application is that we had all the project ready to go. We had all the money. We were almost assured to get the grant. And for some reason, the county refused to sign the application. They only had to sign as a property owner, that they were not approving the project. They were just saying, we own the property, and they were going to just sign it. So they did not do that. And you can well imagine my disappointment and the commission's disappointment. So for the last 2 years, myself and others in the community have been trying to convince the county that we needed to get moving on a plan or a program for what would happen to the courthouse after they moved. I could get really no interest in that over those 2 years. This year, I was successful, again, along with others, and the county agreed to work with us to form a very quick task force. And that is what they did. They approved it with the project of coming up with a recommendation about what the future of the courthouse would be. The task force is very small. The commission appointed Chair Smith and Chair Commissioner Schrader to be on that. They also took our recommendation of having representatives from the Downtown Oregon City Association, DOCA, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Oregon City Business Alliance. And those members that we had recommended as the city were approved. I'm also on the committee. I co-chair it with Chair Smith. And we also have James Graham, who is our economic development manager. And that is, and basically the county's economic development manager, their facilities manager, I'm trying to think of who else. And then the courthouse building manager they're not technically members of the community, but they are their committee. They're technically just there to give us information. So some of you may or may not know that the historic courthouse is the third one that was built on that in downtown Oregon City. Two, the one that's there now and one before that, the Second Empire one was burned because they didn't take care of it. And the third one was built in 1936, and it's an Art Deco reinforced concrete building. Some of the interesting things about it that I want to tell you briefly is that about 350,000 board feet of timber in that courthouse was grown in Clackamas County. It was very specific with the works Progress Administration and the Public Works Administration that the materials come from as many as they could from Clackamas County. However, the bricks came from Yamhill County, so we didn't get the brickwork. We didn't really have a brickwork at that time. So as many people as possible were put to work on the courthouse who were also from Clackamas County, so that it was truly a major economic development project using materials grown in Clackamas County and people who were employed there working in Clackamas County. So as I said, we formed the ad hoc committee, and we had a little bit of a pause because some of you may or may not know, but Chair Smith had a medical incident, and so that delayed us. But we've had 2 meetings to date, and what we've talked about are opportunities and constraints of that particular building, and I know many of you hear all of the rumors about, well, it's falling into the river, or this is going on, that's going on. But let's just be frank, and I can tell you that over the last 78 years, the county has done a little deferred maintenance, and they have probably made some repairs as they needed to do. They went from basically 5 courtrooms to about 11, and so they are crammed in there like sardines. We did take a tour of it after hours to be able to see some of the systems. We didn't get to go in the basement, and unfortunately they wouldn't let us go on the roof, which I really wanted to go up there because I wanted to kind of see what was going on with that particular portion of the structure. But what I'm basically giving you information on is that we have a 3rd meeting, and I think we need more, but be that it may, we'll have 3 meetings. So there's kind of a roundtable discussion going on whether it should be as is, rehabilitated, or demolished. And it looks like the committee's general sentiment, although we haven't voted, it would be for some sort of rehabilitation or renovation. One of the things that you need to know is that I have been asking the county since the day I started talking about this back in 2019 and before that, is that we needed to be in partnership with them. And not a partnership where we are at the receiving end after an application's been filed and we're doing the review. That's reactive. I want us to be proactive. I'd like us to have a seat at the table as a city. It's well known that this community relies on that courthouse for many things, and we think that the people that are on this committee feel that it needs to be reactivated and continue to contribute. It's basically, the pearl in the necklace. If you look at downtown as a necklace, and that is right smack dab in the middle. Also, we've been told that, that the courthouse is part of our living room. Downtown is our living room. And it's really important that this valuable asset, number 1, not be allowed to sit vacant. Number 2, not allowed to deteriorate any further. And number 3, that we can come up with a partnership with the county, and they don't have to put any money into it, but of course, I'm going to ask them for money, and we are going to ask them for money to help maintain it, because they said it's about $350,000 a month, and so, I'd like to see what that entails, what does that mean, to keep it maintained. Obviously, they're not going to turn the heat and the lights off on it, but they plan to be out by May of 2025, which means we don't have a whole lot of time, which is why, from way back when, we were asking them to work with us, to talk to us about it, because we didn't want to be doing something at the last minute. And I won't say this is the last minute, but it's fairly close to the last minute. But I think that to give the county some kudos, they did agree to set up this task force. I don't think we're going to have time to go into all the aspects of it that I think we should go into, but we do have to have a seat at the table. And so I hope that you will join with me in supporting, the city's efforts, our community's efforts to keep this resource. One of the things that I thought about today that was brought up by a staff person is that many of you know that there's filming going on over by the Singer Hill Cafe. It would make a great interim use as a movie set. We could put out the word to every movie company in the world, and also we have the Oregon Film Commission, that this courthouse is available for movies that need a courthouse set. And you would not be surprised to know that there's a lot of need for that. When I was working on the Multnomah County Courthouse, we had people in and out of there all the time doing filming because it was a courthouse. So I'm hoping that you will join with the commission in, if you see any of the commissioners or any of their staff, to let them know that this is an important asset to our community and that we need to work together to make sure that it stays viable, that it stays activated, and that we can have the time that we need to do the rehab. I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money, of course, but then what doesn't? You've got a building that was built in 1936. So I'm hoping, just to give you this update, and I will keep you appraised as what the recommendation is and where that's going to go as far as the commission. I just saw a post that said the county's not meeting in session again until after November the 7th. So I'm like, okay. But anyway, so I'd be happy to answer any questions. A couple of things people did ask me real quick is that they said, well, what about a Liberty Plaza? So that is part of the main property of the courthouse, but the Holman building, which is the law library and where the jurors meet, that is a separate parcel. They seem to want to support us in our efforts to get that as a park so that we continue to have that as an open space. So then there's the parking lot, Liberty Plaza, and then there's the main building itself. They do not plan to leave the building that's down on 12th, where Community Corrections is. They're going to keep that. They have some use, minimal use for the Holman building, and that's all they've been able to divulge at this particular time. But they, I know they're moving, we know they're moving, but we want to make sure that they continue to involve us and keep us at the table with them in discussions about what happens with this building. So that's just my little update for you. Any questions?
Thanks, Mayor McGriff, for coming tonight in the update. One clarification, the figure that you gave, the 350,000, is that an annual number?
That's what they said. I went back to my notes from the last meeting, but again, I think that we need to verify it, make sure that that is the number, or I hope that's not a month.
Yeah.
If it's 350,000 a month, I was going to, my heart's going to skip a little beat.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Mayor McGriff. Are you thinking there's any chance of leasing the building, or is it going to be, or hoping to have an outright purchase?
I think that should stay on the table. What I really would hope, and I think the Oregon City folks on this group don't want the county to sell it off to the first, let's say, Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes along. That happened with the Blue Heron Mill, and we all saw where that went.
Thank you.
Good.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you for coming and the update.
Thanks, Dirk.
I'm not sure how much you know about the building, but from what I see on the outside, I see a lot of brick. And I know brick's usually not any good in an earthquake. But I know that the county's done some upgrades over the years. Is it seismically upgraded yet, or would that have to happen?
Did you hear what I said about the deferred maintenance?
Yeah.
No, it is, as I said, it's made out of brick, and it's reinforced concrete. But it's 1936 reinforced concrete. No, it would need to be upgraded, obviously, if there's a change of use that requires more occupancy. It would have to be upgraded, but I think that there are ways that could be done in stages so that, wouldn't take the hit. And then again, it does have it has many things going for it besides the wonderful Art Deco on the front. I don't know if you've noticed, Mercury is up there in the top, and then we've got the Scales of Justice. But the building is historic. It is eligible for the National Register. It would be eligible for historic rehab tax credits and many other benefits that come with that National Register listing. The county's already acknowledged that if something is to occur to it, that they would have to go through a 106 process, which is through the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service Department of Interior. I don't see that as a detriment. I see that as a benefit because sometimes with historic structures, there are some leeways that are not allowed to occur on buildings that are more modern and more current. So yes, it's not seismically upgraded. It has some geotech issues, obviously. We've got the river right there. We've got the 8th Street steps that go down there. And I don't know if you've been down there lately. I was there about 3 weeks ago. I don't recommend it. Go with a friend. The river's right there. We also have the issue of it's where Singer Creek gets piped under the street, comes down off and then goes underneath and there's outfall. If you've been on the river, its outfall is right near there. Yeah. That may be contributing to some erosion, but I have a stack of reports like this that I have been plowing through and reading to see what the county said. And I'll be honest with you, the report that they did to talk to the state of Oregon about why they needed a new courthouse. Well, they painted it in the worst light possible, of course, to make sure that they could get the money. And they got most of it. I don't think they got all of it, but they got a lot. And, you know, this was driven a lot not only by the commission, but driven by the chief presiding judge, because, you know, everybody else is getting a new courthouse. So, you know. And if you've seen the new one that Multnomah County has, I've seen a report that was very similarly done to that. And it was like, this is the worst building ever. And it's not the worst building ever. But, you know, again, as I said, maintenance has been deferred on it, you know, basically for close to 50 years. And that has to add up. I mean, they've made some improvements to the HVAC system. They've made some improvements here and there to electrical. You know, the plumbing, the bathrooms are, well, you don't want to know. It doesn't have ADA access inside as well as it could be. And again, they've just been chopping it up into little spaces over the years as they've needed to expand. And our district has gotten bigger. And, you know, we started out with, you know, very few judges, and, you know, now we've got 11. And that's a lot. That's a lot of judges. So our county has grown.
All right. And then as a historic structure, are there any uses that it couldn't be? Is there anybody you'd have to turn down? Hotels?
Well, the mixed-use downtown zone is very liberal, and although I probably have most of it in my head, I would defer to our community development director, but there are a variety of uses that can go in there. Again, I think the issue is not so much the uses, the issue has to do with the occupancy and the building code. I think that's where primarily some of the issues are going to come up, because again, if you change the occupancy from what it is now to office, so if it just got upgraded as office, I would say that probably the requirements, and Mr. Dole can correct me on that since he's the licensed architect, the requirements probably would not be as onerous or severe. But let's say we went to an occupancy where we'd have a hotel. Yes, that's going to require a whole set of things. And again, it's not the zoning code. And matter of fact, it was pointed out in our meeting that we had some constraints with the zoning, and I just said, no, we don't. We have constraints with the building code. That's where we're going to have some constraints.
Okay.
Is that correct?
All right. Thank you very much.
Well. Perfect.
Appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Thank you for the time. I appreciate being able to come in person and give you an update instead of just writing a memo or having, you know, putting something like this on staff when they haven't been at all the meetings. So I thank you for the opportunity to update you, and I will keep you posted. And if you have any other comments or anything that you think that we haven't thought of, because we haven't thought of everything as the committee, please feel free to email me and let me know, or most of you have my phone number, call me. Members of the public, if you have any ideas, email me. I'd love to hear it. We got to put a lot of pressure on the county. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Any other public comments that we have cards on? Anyone online? Okay.
No, there's no one online, and I think all the other comments are for something on the agenda.
Okay. All right. Ms. Richter, do I need to read the legislative script again?
No.
No. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to item 4A, LEG 24-01, Park Place Concept Plan Code Amendments. I'm going to start off with the staff report.
Thank you. While Pete is pulling up the presentation, I wanted to just start with a couple of introductory remarks. First, I'd like to say that I'm going to get the mic as close as I can. The acoustics in the room are not great, so if you can't hear in the back, please move to the front. If you need a hearing-assisted device, we have 2 of them that are not in use, and we're happy to lend those out. So the other parts that I'd like to introduce about this item is that it's a continued public hearing from September 23rd. The hearing is not for any development application. It's a legislative public hearing to review code changes. Just a little bit of background in terms of how we got here. In 2022, there was a development application proposed by ICON. At the time, it was called Park Place Crossing. That was reviewed as a master plan, which is a discretionary review process. A discretionary review is one which requires the individual judgment of each planning commissioner, city commissioner, or whomever the decision maker is to decide if an application meets a criterion. The Planning Commission approved the application, the City Commission denied the application on appeal, and upon appeal, the Land Use Board of Appeals sent the decision back to the city, saying that Oregon revised statutes required that we can only apply clear and objective criteria to applications that involve housing, not a discretionary review. So after receiving this decision from LUBA, and as an aside, a failed attempt at the Court of Appeals, the City Commission directed staff to create clear and objective code criteria that further implements the Park Place concept plan without a discretionary review. Which brings us to today. So staff and yourselves, the Planning Commission, have been working on clear and objective code criteria since May of this year. And the hearing tonight is for you to consider all the proposed code amendments and make a recommendation to the City Commission about these code changes. I was asked at a certain point, when is the appropriate time to comment on a development application? And that's a good question. My answer is that it depends a little bit on the development, but most likely there will be, at some point in the future, a subdivision application, which is typically a type 2 process. That means that staff will send a notice of application to property owners within 300 feet of the subject site and to any city-recognized neighborhood association. And folks who receive the notice have 14 days to comment on the application and submit those comments to the Planning Division. So that's the appropriate time for an actual development application. So again, I just want to reiterate that tonight's hearing is to review proposed code changes. And those changes are to create clear and objective criteria to implement the concept plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pete to go through the brief presentation.
Thanks, Aquila. It works. Good evening, Commissioners. So, as Aquila mentioned, this is the second public hearing to review the legislative code amendments for clear and objective standards for the Park Place concept plan. Tonight, we're going to review the main points in the staff memorandum that we put together to respond to development-related comments that were provided at the September 23rd hearing. We're going to review the few remaining code amendments since the last hearing, take public testimony, have a discussion, and then make a recommendation on file LEG 2401. In your packet, the memorandum covers three main topics. The first of these is the code related to alleys and garage orientation standards. The Commission has heard testimony from developers that the alley requirements in the code would create additional costs. The alley requirements are clear and objective and are intended to achieve the design intent for housing in the Park Place concept plan. And the code purpose, which is highlighted in yellow here, was in part to enhance the residential streetscape and diminish the prominence of garages and parking areas, and enhance public safety by preventing garages from obscuring main entrances or blocking views of the street from inside residences. In the memorandum, I've provided a lot of bullet points about alley design and what it's intended to achieve as well. I'm not going to go into those. And I want to point out that the proposed revisions that were before you actually make the code that we have in place more permissive by providing clearer criteria for exemption from those standards within overlay districts and specific areas in new residential development. Type 2 modifications are permitted at the same time as land use review for subdivisions, site plan and design review, and not as a separate process. Finally, state law requires mandatory adjustments for middle housing, manufactured, multifamily, and mixed-use development. The next topic in the memorandum deals with the housing diversity standards that we wrote. The housing diversity standards implement a key element of the Park Place concept plan, which is to envision a mix of housing types and ranges of affordability. They too are clear and objective and allow for type 2 modifications. Requiring a minimum amount of middle housing is well within the land use authority of the city. And when drafting these standards, we researched several other jurisdictions that already have similar requirements. The requirement applies to the original or parent lots in a land division. So a land division could certainly be designed to accommodate an even number of townhomes at the time of platting, which is one of the concerns that you've heard. Also, the requirement by law is not allowed to preclude further middle housing land division or middle housing units from being built under state law. So the standard that we have drafted applies at the time of subdivision review, but it would allow following platting if the lots are subsequently divided according to the code, it would allow for that, and that's a requirement of state law. The third item in your memo deals with the parks and trails land dedication and fee in lieu. So the amount of land dedication or the fee in lieu is based on consideration of the level of service standard that is set forth in the parks master plan, along with parkland needs set forth in the Park Place concept plan. Recently adopted, the Parks Master Plan calls for a combined neighborhood community park level of service of 5 acres per 1,000 people for neighborhood and community parks. The Park Place Concept Plan calls for 1 3 to 5 acre neighborhood park and 1 8 to 10 acre community park. Development of the 1,459 units envisioned in the Park Place Concept Plan at that level of development would result in a level of service of 2.9 acres on the low end to 3.4 acres of parks per 1,000 residents. Staff has recommended 4 acres of land dedication per 1,000, which is close to the Parks Master Plan projection of 5 units per acre, and that would still generate land acreage is sufficient to satisfy the Park Place Concept Plan. And those calculations are sufficient to show that the land dedication and fee in lieu obligations are directly proportional to the land needed to serve future Park Place residents. And there was concern with respect to acquisition and system development charges. So with respect to the concerns about paying twice for parkland, when a developer pays a current park system development charge, that fund cannot be used for acquisition of Park Place parkland, and so there's no double recovery for the same land. If the City Commission decided to change the park's SDC to include land acquisition cost in Park Place, then an applicant would be eligible for park's SDC credits to eliminate the land costs imposed through the system development charge. Now I'll go into the few code amendments that are remaining. First one is...
1 minute. Commissioner LaSalle.
Pete, I'd like to know how much longer you have on your presentation, because
I have
at the last meeting we had several people leave because they couldn't make their comments.
4 more slides.
How much time?
We'll let Pete continue.
3 minutes.
Yeah, we'll let Pete continue.
We heard at the last meeting a concern that the perimeter transition standard and how that requirement, whether that requirement applies to properties outside the UGB. It does not. The point of the revision that we're showing here clarifies that the requirement to match dimensional standards in the transition area applies only to abutting city-zoned residential subdivisions. We're not requiring city lots match county zoning dimensional requirements outside the city, and so that's the point of that revision. In the residential design standards, we are correcting a code reference here to that had erroneously referred to one set of single-family design standards. With respect to mitigation for any modifications to design standards, depending on the housing type, that would refer to the driveway standards in 1612-035 and the single-family detached and duplex design standards in 1716, and the middle housing design standards in 1721. So we'd be adding those chapter references and correcting that. (1721-105) housing diversity standards was revised earlier to require lots to be identified at the time of subdivision rather than units. This is the mechanism needed by the city to ensure a certain amount of middle housing lots will be developed with middle housing units. Section D specifies that the original or parent lots be identified on the plat and the potential for further middle housing land division be permitted by state law. This also responds to the concern that the standard would preclude an even number of townhome units, since the middle housing original lots would abut one another and could be designed to accommodate an even number of townhomes. And that concludes the outstanding code revisions that we have left. The Planning Commission's options are to recommend adoption of the draft code amendments as proposed, recommend adoption of the draft code amendments with revisions and continue the public hearing, or do not recommend adoption of the code amendments and provide further direction to staff. And thanks. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer.
All right, any questions for staff? Good.
I think we'll, Mr. Walters, I did not understand your last bullet point on, wasn't the parks, it wasn't the diversity of housing choices, what was before that?
Alleys.
Alleys, the alley requirement?
Maybe it was how,
Commissioner West, I think the last code revision, we added one word that was original. And the purpose of that is to clarify that the original lots that have to be identified for middle housing, those are the three that there can only be three original lots that abut each other.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I'll look through this, and if there's something else here, I'll look it
Okay.
on my,
Okay, any other questions?
oh, you don't, your PowerPoint isn't on here, is it?
Your mic's not on.
No,
No?
it's just up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for staff? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to public comment, or public testimony rather. Is there anyone who is a representative of a recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization that wishes to speak? Okay. No, thank you. Okay, we will move on to public comment. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes, same as we did before, or in the last hearing. In the last hearing, we had some, comments from the audience, which we want to not do tonight. If you can keep from shouting out your opinions from the audience, that would be great. The proper place to share your opinions is during these comments. So we'll start off with Kelly Poindexter.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Poindexter. I live in the Trailview neighborhood, and it's my understanding that the Trailview neighborhood was established in 2003, and we've had 21 years with one way in and one way out. A previous planning meeting informed us that there are about 200 automobiles traveling our streets on a daily basis, and that the new concept would bring that number up to 2,000 autos daily. Living on a dead-end street is something that is sought after and encouraged our decision to buy into this development. Adding 2 more through roads to our neighborhood would be a safety concern. As someone who walks our tract almost daily, I'm confident that I will be more on guard for myself and my dog. We have first responders in our development that need to be able to get out in times of imminent danger, such as the fires in 2020. Adding traffic will be more of a deterrent to them in future events. This new concept is causing me to want to move out of Oregon City altogether. And I appeal to you to put yourself in our situation and make a decision based on what you would like done for yourselves. I would ask that we not add 2 more entrances to our dead-end neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Tyler Gill.
Tyler Gill. My partner and I own an acre property on Hollycrest Lane, right in the heart of the proposed Park Place South Village. We bought the property about 2.5 years ago. After having spent nearly 20 years living in Southeast Portland, we want to get out of the city and buy some property to someday raise a family.
Can you just move just a couple inches farther away from the mic? I know that's rare to hear from us, but yeah, thank you. And someday buy a property to raise a family in a more rural and nature-filled setting. When we found the property that we now call home, we were elated. At no time during the process of buying the property were we notified about the Park Place concept plan. When a neighbor told us about the proposal to turn our neighborhood into high-density residential housing and commercial retail, we did not believe them until we looked up the plan for ourselves. Needless to say, we were shocked and also felt a little bit duped. I think that there are many pros to high-density housing, and this works for many people. But a multitude of these neighborhoods already exist. Just look at the Mill on Maple Apartments that was just completed down the street. The South Village proposed area right now consists almost entirely of privately owned residential properties. Just how do you propose taking our private properties and turning them into commercial and retail shops? There are plenty of places to build new developments, but our backyards are not one of them. Where will all of these new families put their kids in school? Our schools are already underfunded and overcrowded. While I see proposals for stormwater treatment, I have seen nothing on the proposal about wastewater treatment. Right now, most of the properties that I know of in this neighborhood, including ours, are on septic. How do you plan on treating wastewater in this new development? We made a conscious decision to move out of high-density housing in the city and move to a rural home to start a family. And now we discover there is a proposal to turn our neighborhood right back into the setting that we were trying to escape, against our will. Not only that, but it seems to be a largely covert, behind-the-curtain sort of project. We were certainly not made aware of this proposal when we bought our house. Forgive me if I'm incorrect in my facts. We've only been a part of this community for 2.5 years now, and only recently learned of this proposal. As far as I understand, this was originally proposed in 2008 and has been rejected and revised for the last 16 years. To quote a gentleman from last month's city council meeting, why are we back here doing this again? I am guessing that the majority, if not all the speakers here tonight, are here to voice their grievances and frustrations with this proposal, and have probably been doing so for the past 16 years. As city council members, you represent the people of your community, the people in this room. You are volunteers and elected officials that are supposed to act on behalf of the citizens, not private companies. You are public servants, not corporate servants. So we respectfully ask you, hopefully for the last time, to listen to us. Please don't make us come back here again. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Megan Keogh.
Members of the City Council. My name is Megan Keogh, and I live on Hollycrest Lane. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I come here again as a resident concerned about the direction of development in our community and the impact these decisions will have both on our local economy and our quality of life. I would like to begin by addressing a significant issue right in the heart of our town. On Main Street alone, I counted that there are 9 empty storefronts. This does not even account for the empty spaces on the side streets throughout Old Town and other parts of Oregon City. The presence of these vacant businesses in our central, visible areas should signal a need for us to focus on occupying these existing spaces before expanding into new developments. Our community should be thriving with vibrant local businesses, and Main Street is a logical place to start if we are serious about revitalizing Oregon City's economy. In addition to the plans for Tumwata Village seem far more reasonable for creating a destination where businesses could genuinely thrive. The village's proposed mix of open space, retail, shopping, residential, office, restaurants, hotel, event space, all align with creating the community hub that has potential as an area that people will want to visit, work, and live in. By contrast, the proposed North and South Park Place developments situated on the hill of rural Livesay Road lack this destination quality, which will make it difficult for these businesses to flourish. The location is isolated and does not provide the same community appeal that Main Street or Tumwata Village could offer. Moreover, I am concerned that this project could create an enclave, which would likely require homeowners to live under HOA restrictions. This may be incompatible with the needs of residents in the surrounding rural residential farm forest 5-acre zoning district who rely on their properties for their livelihoods. On the topic of new developments, the new massive apartment complex on Maple Lane has already had a noticeable effect on the traffic. Now, at the intersection of Maple Lane and on Holly Lane, I understand that Mountain View Church also has plans to construct a mega church in this location. I believe this will place additional strain on traffic, furthering affect the residents on Holly Lane and the surrounding community. It is important to recognize that each of these separate projects are in fact interconnected. The ripple effects are real. I urge you to take a step back and reconsider the collective impact of these developments. Let's prioritize filling our existing storefronts and focus on more strategic development of destination areas like Tumwata Village. And please, let's be mindful of the ways each decision affects the daily lives of Oregon City residents. We are asking for thoughtful, balanced growth that truly benefits our community, not what benefits Icon's pockets. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tom Guile.
From Oregon City resident. First off, I'd like to apologize for last time my emotional outburst about this whole situation. But 21 years I've been dealing with this. I've had a stroke in the meantime, everything that could go wrong because of just the stress of dealing with this for 21 years. But tonight I'm here as the current president of the Trailview Homeowners Association. What you're getting up there is a map of the area in question here. I realize this doesn't follow in the same code that Pete presented tonight, but I think traffic should be part of a code. Any codes that come up, clear and objective. As the current president, I plead with you on behalf of our residents to please take into consideration the traffic that our neighborhood will be dealing with. Our previous president and other officers came here previously with a letter from our HOA attorney. In Trailview, we have 43 homes. Please look at the attached map. All the yellow surrounds Trailview. If Journey Drive and Shatner Drive are open to through traffic, there will be a huge increase in mass through traffic, and the children who play in the streets will be endangered. This is definitely a pass-through intersection. If you look at the map, and I'm pointing it for everybody here, all around here around Trailview, why would anybody all the way over on this side by Cattle Drive drive all the way around up to this area to get out on a one-way out of what their concept is projecting. Nobody would want to drive all the way down there. They take cut-throughs through our neighborhood. More importantly, it's been pointed out, during the fires of just a few years ago, there was only one entrance and exit out of Trailview, and that's at Winston Drive. For all the neighborhoods and neighbors in this area, not just Trailview. Winston Drive is just a short half street that all these homes use to get in and out of in these developments. During the fires, it was an hour just to get out of Winston and another hour and a half to get down Holcomb Boulevard. Many of us, including myself, just went home rather than burn alive in our cars like happened in California. We didn't know how close those fires were. If ICON is allowed to add all these homes and open these streets into our development, we are all heading into huge traffic congestion in this small development of ours. I realize that you cannot stop ICON since they pleaded their case to the state, but please help us with our traffic concerns. There should be some kind of code regarding traffic in neighborhoods. No development should occur until the road down to Redland is completed. At the last meeting, one of the attendees who lives below this development approached me right here in the foyer and informed me that ICON have withdrawn an offer on their property. Apparently, ICON now realizes they do not have to complete the road down to Redland because they are being allowed to build as they wish. Please help us in our existing homeowners association neighborhood. We plead with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jane Nitschke, I believe. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
My name is Jane Nitschke, and I live in the Abernathy Landing neighborhood. And I have concerns about ICON traffic flow. That is the main concern. I have no issues with the number of houses. But all of the traffic is going to be going on to Holcomb, and Holcomb is already getting busier. The intersection between Redland Roads and 213 is very heavy. We've all spoken about the fire when trying to get down Holcomb Road took an hour to 2 hours just to get down to the freeway. There should be another egress from the new neighborhood. There should be a traffic flow study that talks realistically about the number of cars that are going to be on the road, not the number of cars that they think are going to be on the road. And there needs to be a traffic flow study before any development is made that protects Trailview, Abernathy Landing, and a lot of the other neighborhoods that are up in the higher Holcomb area as well as down below. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joyce Carlson.
I just wanted to bring attention to, in my backyard, I used to see pheasants from my kitchen window washing dishes, deer. It's disappearing. All these neighborhoods going up. It's just the traffic's increasing. The animals are disappearing. And we have a lot of kids in our neighborhood and skinny road areas and a lot of walkers that go through. And it's a big safety issue. And basically, with all these increasing developments, it's destroying our city's beautiful charm. It's disappearing, and it's been really sad for me that I have big concerns about safety issue with traffic goes flying down our street, safety issues that others have mentioned with wildfire evacuations. And I just have a big concern with that. And I also, the other concern I mentioned at the last meeting was walking trails through people's backyards where their unmentionables are hanging on clothesline and their private fruit bushes and what's not that they've bought and planted. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention the safety issues, the wildlife disappearing because of all these developments, and we've lost a lot of big, huge, old trees. I can tell you we've lost some big, huge cedars up the street. It's just sad to see this wildlife being destroyed and the safety issues on top of it. So, and I'm concerned someone's going to get hit and killed one of these days. People are just flying through more and more. The more developments that happen, the worse this traffic's getting, and it's just not. It's not a sustainable thing. It's not safe. It's not good. And I feel really bad to see that the city's being destroyed. The peaceful charm about it is being destroyed. The safety's being destroyed. It's just enough. Enough. So, thank you. I'm sure there's something I forgot.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Christine Kaczynski.
I have copies of my testimony. Would you like those? You ready? Christine Kaczynski. I live on Holly Lane. I'm here tonight with some comments from the people of Holly Lane. They're asking for a trip cap. We've noticed since the apartments went in that we were supposed to have 176 trip caps, but be more than that. So we want to ask for that now. We also ask that Senate Bill 762, which is the wildfire adapted communities, become part of the entire Park Place concept plan, to include all of the boundaries within the plan, as well as the entirety of Holly Lane, and to include the planned extensions of Holly Lane. We ask that an evacuation plan be part of the entire Park Place concept plan, and this is to include, again, the boundaries of Park Place concept plan, as well as Holly Lane and all of the proposed extensions. If Holly Lane is to take on added traffic by development from Oregon City, we ask that the city cover entirely any liabilities from landslides. This is a very unstable area and one that I don't believe development should be taken in. DLCD has made a recommendation to cities and counties that aligns with statewide planning goal 1. DLCD is asking cities and counties to use best practices and in a process to engage community members, particularly those from traditionally underserved and underrepresented population. In planning wildfire adapted communities, which includes preparedness, evacuation, adaptation, mitigation, and recovery planning, DLCD has guidelines online for this. They do recommend putting people back into planning. I request, therefore, that the city send all meeting notices to everybody on Holly Lane, even all the way up to Maple Lane. I have previously, on at least 3 or 4 occasions, given the city instructions on reading a thesis written by Professor Bill Burns of Dogami, which covers the very difficult and very unstable Morton Road landslide, a street that you want to put a road onto. Go ahead and read it, because after you do, you will no longer be interested in putting these streets in. It's far too dangerous. In fact, I would recommend that it's very beneficial to the city if they contact Professor Bill Burns of Dogami and ask him to consult with Oregon City regarding their plans for Beamer, Swan, and Morton. And you might put Holly in there too. You need to read his thesis, because after that, you will cancel your plans. We ask the city comply with and add all of these comments and requests from the city into the Park Place concept plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bradley King.
Hello, my name is Bradley King. I'm a resident in Oregon City, and I also represent a few of the landowners as their commercial broker off of Livesay. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Bradley King. I'm an Oregon City resident, and I represent a few of the landowners who own property off Livesay Road. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I've heard a lot of commentary about the kind of the negative effects that the development along these roads is going to have on residents. And I've also heard a lot of negative effects that not being able to develop any of these properties has had on the residents that I represent. Many of these landowners have owned these properties for over 80 years through multiple generations, and their families essentially bought these investments hoping to be able to develop them down the road. They've paid property taxes on these pieces of land for 60, 70, 80 years. And I understand that a lot of the residents nearby don't want a development going in next to their house. But I think it's important for everybody to remember that at one time, their house that they're living in was a development. And they disrupted homes that were nearby them. And they disrupted the living creatures, all the deer and all that. So I think it's important to take that into consideration, but I also think we should take into consideration the lives that we're disrupting by not allowing development. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Last, we have Harlan Barrow. Do we have
Thank you, Chairman Stoll, and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Harlan Barrow, and I am the Acquisition and Development Manager for Icon Construction Development based in West Lynn. The city's memo that was provided to you appears to focus on refuting the legal authorities mentioned in our legal counsel's letter, but makes no attempt to respond to the policy concerns highlighted in the other 35 or more pages of detailed testimony we provided. In other words, a legal, not a planning memo, telling you why you may do the code amendments, but not whether you should. We have provided substantial evidence explaining how the residential design standards will unreasonably increase the cost of homes. The city attorney is incorrect that ORS 197A, Section 400, which prohibits standards that discourage needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay, only applies when the standard is amended. By prohibiting the application of standards that may discourage needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay, the statute would certainly apply in any future application of the garage design and orientation standards. Regardless of whether LUBA would stick to the 22-year-old opinion that in the LUBA case cited by staff, you have in our provided evidence, actual evidence that continuing the garage setback and orientation, as well as the alley requirements, will increase the cost of a residential construction by 20% for individual units due to garage orientation requirements, and 25 to 50% for land development costs related to alley requirements. So the question is whether the aesthetic preference that the city made in 2006 are relevant in today's market and regulatory environment, and whether those aesthetic preferences are worth increasing the cost of the homes in the Park Place Concept Plan area by 20 to 50%. We think that given the minimal practical gains provided by the design aesthetic of homes in light of the city's objective to also require middle housing, we do not believe that the standards creating such cost increases are reasonable. Finally, as to the questions concerning the parkland and trail dedications requirement. Oh, wow, that went really fast. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you on these issues and in finding ways to get Holly from Holcomb to Redland.
Okay, thank you. All right. For testimony, time for discussion, questions of staff, motions. Anybody want to open up the discussions?
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start with an easier part, hopefully, and that is updating the SDCs. It seems to me that the way we have this structured, well, isn't there a better way? What is the status of updating park SDCs in the city? And for clearer wording and more legal, I can't remember from the old days if it's just land acquisition or capital improvements, but it seems to me it should be both.
I'm going to defer to Aquila, at least on the SDC discussion, because she's been involved in that most recently.
I'm going to ask Carrie to answer the question.
So I'm not sure that I understand your question, but I'll try.
Well, I can see from their point how it seems like the city is double dipping. What can we do to clean that up, clean that language up and make it uniform and or consistent with other cities?
So right now, if development were proposed in Park Place, they would pay a park SDC. That park SDC is not collecting right now for land in Park Place.
Okay.
Because the methodology and the assessments have not kept pace with Park Place. So we are not collecting today for the cost of the community and neighborhood parks identified in the Park Place concept plan. So there isn't a single dip, if you will, right?
Right.
The code amendments propose a dedication and fee in lieu arrangement. So if you come in for a development and you have your land is touched by a mapped park, you are obligated to dedicate acreage based on 4 acres per 1,000 dwellers, right? And we're using census data to figure out how many residents will have per unit. And then from that, we'll know how much parkland an applicant has to dedicate by how many dwelling units they're proposed or how many residents they'll bring. If your land, so we're gonna acquire real property that way, right? So when you record your plat for your subdivision, you're going to dedicate a portion of your land for a park, right? If you are an applicant and your property does not touch a mapped park, then you have to pay a fee in lieu to the city through the city's SDC methodology to pay for that land, and then the city will negotiate and acquire the remaining land necessary for the provision of a park. So that's how the city is going to provide the necessary level of service parks for this area, okay? That has nothing to do with SDCs, right? That's the single dip, right? That has nothing to do with SDCs. The city, on a different track, has adopted a new Parks Master Plan, right? Just recently, in the last 6 months.
Yes.
That new Parks Master Plan includes Park Place parks in it. The city has not updated its SDC methodology to reflect what's in the new master plan. So we have to figure out when we come to the city commission with the Parks SDC arrangement, how we're going to deal with land recovery costs for Park Place, because we cannot double dip. I appreciate that we cannot do that. So so the answer to your question is, yes, SDCs are complicated, but they're not part of this yet. And they won't come to you. They will go to the city commission.
Okay, will they be consistent, these new SDCs for all over the city, or is just this a Park Place thing?
SDCs are paid for all over the city, for all new development within the city. All of the projects in the Parks Master Plan get totaled up, all the projects the city has planned, and then divided by the number of units that the city anticipates to be built, and then that's how much the SDC is.
Will they pay for any of the trails that are proposed in that area?
They may pay. I haven't checked the SDC list for trails, so I don't know the answer to that. If they pay for trails, if the SDCs pay for trails, that would be, we would owe the applicants credits because we are already collecting through land dedication and fee in lieu for trails through these amendments in Park Place.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
If it's not clear, I'd like to have an opportunity to clarify, but.
Okay, Commissioner Dole.
Yeah, just kind of building on your explanation, Ms. Richter. It seems if the SDC reevaluation goes to City Commission, if we implement the code changes today, it seems like you would come back to us at some point, right? If City Commission reevaluates and establishes SDCs for the Park Place, then we would have a double dip scenario. So you would either be forcing City Commission's hand on that decision when they evaluate SDCs, or we would have to come back and modify the code once again. Am I following you?
Yes, but I think that the way that there's a third option here than the two you just identified, and the third option is that the SDC assessment does not include the land acquisition costs in Park Place.
Gotcha.
Right, because if those are carved out, then the SDCs are not collecting for those lands.
Perfect explanation, I appreciate that. Forgive me for this question, but is there any other communities or places in the city where we have that existing condition now? Where we have a fee in lieu of for parks, or a fee in lieu of that would take place or precedent over SDCs? Or is this a one-off with regards to Park Place?
It will be a one-off in terms of, with respect to Park Place, but it is not, Oregon City is not the first city to have a structure like this. The city of Sandy just recently adopted their Parks Master Plan, and they exclude land acquisition costs because they have a dedication and fee in lieu scheme that we used as part of our model for our code language.
Makes sense. No, I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
And so, but just to be clear, I think that if we do this for Park Place, we're going to do this for Thimble Creek too. This approach makes sense in new development, annexation, UGB expansion areas, where you have large pieces of land and you have new development that creates a need for community and neighborhood parks. It won't work in infill situations.
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I appreciate the explanation.
All right, Commissioner LaSalle.
The packet for the Planning Commission this evening contained 405 pages, which we're expected to read. The majority of those pages were, again, arguments from Icon Construction to change the Park Place concept plan. That is not the purpose of tonight's meeting. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to approve the changes in the wording of the Park Place concept plan to achieve clear and objective wording and standards. It's not to change the concept plan. That's already been decided. It's gone through the courts. And I think enough has been said and enough arguments have been put forth to put that to rest. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Planning Commissioner Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to go back to Commissioner Dole's question. Currently, our Thimble Creek code, it does require land dedication and allows for fee in lieu and also SDC reimbursement. Thimble Creek is another area that's similar to Park Place in that it was a concept planned area, and so there's a lot of that area that's actually not in the city yet.
All right, Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Yes, thank you. We've probably gone over this already, but I'm going to bring it up again. With the Court of Appeals ruling that we need to come up with clear and objective standards for the Park Place concept plan language, since the Court of Appeals ruling, does that mean that the rest of the city is in some way involved too? Like if somebody wanted to apply for a small subdivision and some leftover land, is the city applying clear and objective standards to all development, or can we still be as discretionary as we want, and it just only applies to the Park Place concept plan?
So the state law, ORS 197A 400, requires clear and objective standards for all housing citywide. So we are applying clear and objective standards citywide.
Do we have to rewrite all the city code?
No,
Okay.
no, you've already done that. You went through a pilot program to do that, and then you did it for the last number of years. You've done that.
Okay.
The situation with Park Place is that Park Place has some special standards that were cultivated as part of the concept plan that never got implemented into clear and objective standards.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Okay. All right. And then there was a couple of comments I wanted to maybe give some of the people that left the comments some answers to. Mr. Gill, he had, I felt, this is how I felt like he had some quite concerns that the zoning dictates development. I'm not exactly sure where he lives, but let's say, because we were talking mostly about the northern end of the concept plan since that's where we had the application. But let's say the southern end, let's say there's a community hub down there, there's some buildings that are, planned. Just because it's zoned for that doesn't mean anything's gonna happen. If there's no demand, no one's gonna build a community center and there's gonna be a bunch of empty buildings. There's no money in that, no developer's gonna invest in that. So I don't think, obviously you can have concerns, but I don't think just because there's a zoned area on a map that, something has to happen. If the property owners chose not to sell it or the property owners chose not to develop it, is there a timeline? Does the concept plan have to ever occur if nobody wanted to develop it?
So I'd like to try to answer that for you, Commissioner Schlagenhofer. So there's a couple of things that have to occur. The first would be annexation into the city. And right now, there isn't any city-applied zoning. There's a comprehensive plan designation that says if it comes into the city one day and a zoning request is made, it should be medium density. That's what we should consider, but there's no actual zone. That annexation request is property owner initiated. So that means that the property owner has to be willing to go through the annexation process. Cities don't typically go out and annex land. And as far as I know, Oregon City hasn't done that. Maybe we have a long time ago, but that's not part of our practice to go out and annex in land. And then once it's annexed and it's zoned, that's when development could occur should the market demand it. as far as if there's a timeline to the concept plan, not that I'm aware of. I think that would actually have to come from Metro, because they have, the Metro regional government actually has those requirements around concept planning. What would happen is after a certain amount of time, we'd want to look at our long-range plans to see if our transportation system plan is keeping up, our stormwater, all of the other infrastructure plans. They get updated, and they would take into account those areas. But I don't, as far as I know, there's not an expiration. I hope that answers your question.
That makes sense, yes, thank you. All right, there was another one, it was by Mrs. Keto. Let me see what her concern was. Well, she had several. And it was also about community hubs, about empty buildings, but yeah, those don't have to be built even though they're part of the plan if there's no demand. She also had a question about a megachurch, and that brought something up that I was not quite sure of. We've had some applications by churches in the past for parking lots and such, but did they have to go by the same standards as all other developers? Traffic counts, traffic studies, do they have to, explain how much traffic they're going to be generating? I don't know if we've ever reviewed an application by a church.
Yes, so if it's in the city, and I guess I want to make a clarification that a lot of these areas that are in the concept plan area are not in the city. So if there is a church nearby, the woman who testified, if there's a church nearby her property, it may be in the county. And so the county would be reviewing that application. But we would go through a set of criteria and look at the traffic generation. Okay.
Let's say the church is not in the city, but the traffic goes through the city. How much say does the city have? I mean, does the county come to the city for some opinions, or does the city have some kind of legal power in those county decisions?
When the city knows of a county application, the city has commented, but we are just a commenter, and that's all we are.
Okay.
And that's...
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
An interested party.
That's right.
All right, any further discussion or questions of staff? Oh, Commissioner Laws.
Here's a few of them. So we were talking before initially in the initial plan, the Main Street Village. Is that, because we talked about mixed commercial, is there going to still be, I mean, we haven't addressed anything, so I'm assuming that the Main Street Village is still part of that Park Place concept plan. Is that correct?
Yes, the Main Street Village is kind of one of the words used in the concept plan for the area along Livesey Road. North Village area, but yep.
Okay, so that's not changing because we didn't do anything that way. And then traffic safety, I know they were doing analysis this year in different areas. I think part of that was Holcomb Road. Does my memory serve me correctly?
I know the Public Works Department does regular traffic counts on roads within the city limit and publishes those on the city website. That has nothing to do with development proposals. Development proposals have to do traffic impact analysis based on the adopted guidelines that we've got for that, and they're pretty detailed. There's trip generation, safety, all these considerations for the traffic impact analysis, and that is done at the time of subdivision review or site plan and design review.
So if a resident wanted to access that information, could they do that for a public records request?
Yes, they could. Yeah, we have traffic impact analysis from the 2022 application for Park Place Crossing. And we have a lot of older applications as well, but those traffic impact analyses need to be updated to take into account not just what's proposed in the application, but background traffic as well that has been approved by the city. For example, on the landfill and how much traffic that's going to add and what does the development add on top of that. So a lot of that is very detailed traffic engineering stuff. Yeah.
And, you know, I have a topic to kind of bring up. I know that the, you know, city has implemented, you know, I'm part of the DEI task force, and one thing they were mentioning is city staff getting involved in obviously, you know, implementing some, you know, education on that. But one thing was mentioned was traffic safety, or, you know, just who's driving, because, you know, there are some people who are lucky enough to be able to work at home, and usually people who are driving usually have to get to work. So some of that has to be, you know, people who can't work at home for whatever reason, do labor jobs. Will that somewhat be considered possibly in the future concerning an application?
I think the equity considerations that, you know, we have with respect to where land uses go and how land use relates to the transportation network, that's taken into account to some extent in the transportation system plan, and also in the way that the city is zoned. So you'll notice that some of the areas that are zoned along major transportation corridors are higher density or multifamily, or they lead to schools and mixed-use areas that are served better by the existing transportation network. So to that extent, that is a really important consideration. I don't want to discount it, and I think it's probably something that needs to be taken into account in the next transportation system plan update as well.
And then the other thing is natural disasters were mentioned frequently here, and erosion as well. I know areas that are facing like Newell Creek Canyon that are typically sliding. And, you know, a fissure in the road could be interpreted as just a flaw in the concrete, but it's actually, there are sections that look visually and are probably sliding. Does the city have a natural disaster erosion plan if something goes haywire? Like, you know, obviously you can throw some concrete over it temporarily and it's going to slide, you know? Like, do we have a plan for that in case, because that is a very volatile area. Like, you know, a lot of it, the trees right now there are keeping that hill afloat. So, you know, you could barricade it off to try to control erosion, but that's temporary, and there's a lot of maintenance with that. Right now, the city does not have a tree policy, and that's the reason that we're not enforcing it. It sounds like NRC is really trying to push that along. So what is do you predict by the time an application comes in for this development that there's going to be tree policy active for the city?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. There's the geologic hazard overlay district, and we know that slides have occurred, and those are mapped. And we most recently did an amendment to incorporate a 200-foot landslide buffer into the geologic hazard overlay district with a pretty strict restriction on residential density in that area. So that's a development criterion. And as you know, there are certain subdivisions that have slid that would probably not have been approved if they had been reviewed under our current geologic hazard overlay district code, which is pretty detailed and has been amended a lot since 1998. Public Works Operations is going to respond to any current slide issues that are an emergency. You know, that's a separate part of the Public Works Department. As far as trees go, we actually do have tree regulations for the geologic hazard overlay. They do restrict tree removal to on steep slopes. So that does get reviewed. And the tree regulations that we have for development applications are pretty clear and objective. They require an analysis of where all the trees are on the property that are over 6 inches in diameter. The NRC has made several comments that the current tree regulations don't go far enough. That's a debate that the public needs to have. I think as far as these code amendments go, we have not heard any direction to amend our current tree regulations yet.
Because I was talking to let me see what the organization is again, or it's called, let me see here, where is it? Oregon City, Alliance of Oregon Cities in general at the state level, you know, planning department getting together, and I did some training, and they were mentioning, you know, obviously there could be a conflict with development at the state level versus, you know, needing the amount of housing versus, you know, conflicting with NROD and tree code. And obviously it's eye for an eye. It's like, you could say the housing's needed, but you could also say that sometimes code conflict, and you could, what would be the priority here in terms of making a decision?
Well, I think the nature of zoning codes is that they try to strike a balance between development and protection of what we consider important, like streams, natural resource overlays, cultural and historic resources. So we have code in place that tries to strike that balance. We recognize that we have obligation to provide land for housing within our urban growth boundary, and that's another part of the thing that drives these amendments. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Commissioner Laws kind of brought an entree into what I wanted to talk about tonight, and that is Code 17.21.09 with the garage orientation, and this whole development requiring detached garages other than if they're in the natural resources area, the geologic hazards, and you know, so here it is, all these environmental issues. This is really adding a lot of impervious surface, and so that bothers me. The other thing that isn't, is that it adds 20% to the cost, or they were estimating, the builder here was estimating 20% to the cost of that house. Now I know this is an affordable development, like that has an income qualifier to get in it, but you'll know, one thing I would probably guarantee you is that no matter what the price point of that home would have been, it will be 20% higher to have this long driveway with a detached garage in the back. And I am just wondering if we can accomplish that, the intent of the Park Place plan to not have snout houses, to have a walkable neighborhood, to have more parking on the streets by any other design standard. And, you know, so you're going to have all the ones on the collectors and minor arterials, they'll have alleys, but and those townhouses don't have to have them detached, correct?
I think this is a good discussion that we can have. I think the townhomes along the major collectors in the future would not be required to have a, I think under the current code, they're required to have a detached garage, but they could request a modification to it through the land use process. The other options that the Planning Commission may want to discuss is whether there needs to be a further exemption granted for certain housing types, such as townhomes, which may not naturally be built with a detached garage. I've heard the same concern as well. However, the intent of the alleys in the majority of the areas that are buildable and not sloped or next to a natural resource area is to try to de-emphasize that garage impact and make it a more walkable streetscape. So I bear that in mind.
Well, can't that be, couldn't that be accomplished by putting the garage, attach it to the house, but put it facing the back? So to avoid the whole lot being taken up by a driveway, there won't be a backyard with a detached garage. Don't people want pets?
Yeah.
Don't they want their children to play in a backyard with, you know, you could fence a backyard. I know in the front yard you can fence like with a little picket fence or something up to, what, it's 3 feet tall? That doesn't count as a real fence for dogs. And
Yeah, we can craft any code you direct us to.
So I want to thank you guys for putting together this memo that is dated October 17th, 2024. I think it really does a great job of discussing all of the clear and objective standards that we had to develop as a result of LUBA making the decision that we had to make clear and objective standards for this plan, right? So I guess what's bothering me is that we are putting together these we have done this, we have put together these standards for the development to work, for the applicant to work with, and now we're getting pushback on the standards that we spent a lot of time putting together with professional architects who did studies on walkability, neighborhood livability, and I think that those things become much more critical when you increase density. So with the density that increases, you also have to increase your livability standards, and you need to have these amenities in your housing so that you can have people squeezed together in more dense developments and have more livable neighborhoods. So I really think that there is an ability for the applicant to get relief through the variance process that allows people to change. Is that correct? They can...
Yeah, the
state
residential design standards are one of the specific minor variances that is allowable as a type 2 process.
Right.
Yep.
So there is an escape valve for certain lots where these designs won't work, correct?
Yes, there is.
And that really wouldn't create, in your estimation, any kind of an unnecessary or unreasonable delay, correct? I mean, I think that was the purpose of this analysis.
Part of the memorandum speaks to that we don't have enough information to agree or disagree with the assertion that this would raise housing costs because we're not reviewing a development application
because
at this time.
There hasn't been any established case law that's decided that.
Yeah. We could ask our engineering staff to, provide what they think is important, but I think they're less concerned about the cost of development than they are about the engineering standards, the drainage, and that sort of thing. I had a conversation with Josh Wheeler, our assistant city engineer, about the alley requirement, and he said, well, the alleys, we don't really take a position on. They are going to be 20 foot wide and designed to whatever standard we have. And if the developer can prove that that is adding cost at the time of application, then they are subject to mandatory adjustment potentially.
Okay, yeah. But I mean, that is where you'll meet your Waterloo is all of the engineering standards that are going to apply to these developments in middle housing.
Yeah, I mean, there are concerns about additional impervious surface, but we've written the standards to the exemptions within those overlay districts, and that was an additional revision, that was an exception. Would you like additional information from the engineering department about the alley requirement?
No, I don't think so. I think that we spent a lot of time on these standards, and I support them.
Okay.
Let me just show you my hand. I really think that we've done an excellent job on putting these together, and I think that this will probably result in, as best as we can do.
Yeah.
I know that there are folks out there that don't want this at all, and that's not the reality. I think, with the state mandated requirements for middle housing, we have to reduce density and increase housing. And it would be much better to have some of these design standards so that at least you have neighborhoods that are, yes, dense, but also have some design standards that create a certain livability and neighborhood character.
If I could just do a little bit of follow-up on these two thoughts. So right now, what we don't have proposed is how a townhouse would act, if you will. So typically, I can't think of too many examples where a townhouse has a detached garage. So I think that's part of what Commissioner West was getting at. So there could be another exception added to the code that allows townhouses to have attached garages. Alternatively, another compromise that would be for the Planning Commission to consider is that any type of housing could have an attached garage if it is alley loaded. And I think what that would do is provide that long, continuous sidewalk and uninterrupted bike lanes, and you get the long front yards along a street, so you have that pedestrian orientation. That's what the alley provides, and in exchange, the house would have an attached garage, and it would almost be like an inverse of a snout house, if you will. So rather than the garage sticking out in front of the house, it'll stick out in back, but it would be alley loaded.
Yeah.
So that's something for the commission to consider. We don't have that written in, so if that's something you want, if you want to discuss, we would work on that language.
Sure, I would think that would make total sense to have a townhouse with an attached garage. I mean, most townhouses
I'm sorry,
do.
Commissioner Espy, I can't hear you. Is your mic on? Or?
It is.
Okay.
I'm probably speaking too far away. But I think, yeah, it makes sense to have townhouses with attached garages. Usually they're vertical structures with garages on the bottom, which, yeah.
So, quick interjection. The code language as it reads right now, which is part of the original code, it says garages shall be detached, side entry or rear entry. And it's been my understanding that those all were three separate options, not, detached rear entry. I think the code already allows it, but we can make it explicit.
You can have an attached rear entry garage or an attached side entry garage.
Correct.
Or you could have a detached rear entry or detached side entry.
But I mean, like with a townhouse, usually, townhouses are kind of used as a tool for infill that, on smaller lots, things that are maybe more difficult to access, et cetera. And sometimes it makes sense for the garage to be in the front. I mean, it might be really hard to maybe put townhouses, which acts as a tool for, certain types of development situations. And then all of a sudden you got to do this side loading garage for a townhouse. I mean, I suppose it would work in some places, but
Not all places.
not all.
The middle housing standard for a townhome allows either. In the Park Place, we've got this additional requirement.
I would advocate for more flexibility in that scenario.
Okay.
Commissioner West, did you have anything else?
Yeah, can I just follow up? So, can we mandate how many lots go to middle housing?
That's what we are attempting to do with the diversity requirement that, based on acreage, a certain number of lots must be designated on the plat for middle housing.
So the middle housing is, garages or alleys are subjected to mandatory adjustments. They can, did I say that right?
Yes.
They can be with a mandatory adjustment if they.
Yes. Yes, so if we have middle housing proposed, we have a mandatory adjustment request under SB 1573, we would have to grant it. You are correct.
So, when this came up, or when I was reading this, I thought, how does a street look that has some middle housing on it and some not middle housing with garages all over the place?
It would look pretty diverse, I guess.
Well, is it practical? Is it common sense? Is it,
Well, there are driveway standards in our public improvement chapter 1612. They limit both the number of driveway cuts and the maximum width of them. They speak to whether it's single family or commercial. So those standards would drive the driveway cut onto the right of way. How the unit itself is designed, whether it has a one-car garage, two-car garage, or no garage at all. There's a lot of housing plans out there that, developers can look at and determine whether that's going to work on their particular piece of ground. It's hard to figure out what it might look like in every situation.
thank you.
Commissioner Laws?
The last thing to mention too, tied to both of these comments, is we're looking at middle housing to be affordable more for townhomes and condominiums, which we've seen in other neighborhoods where they end up going for rent and they end up having at least 4 people in a 3-bedroom renting out to afford to be able to live. And what we're losing is an opportunity of single dwelling homes that are affordable. And there are neighborhoods like that now to where they're affordable homes. They're like a little bit of an A-frame in a sense. They have a loft, they have a 1-bedroom. And we're losing those opportunities for someone to actually own a home that's detached from another property. Is there any way to provide incentives or encouragement? Because we're looking at 5 phases here, not just 1.
But our system development charges are pretty set. So beyond, subsidies for affordable housing that are provided at the state and federal level, I think it's very difficult for the city to act as a housing authority. What we can do is craft land use regulations that promote the right, an adequate number of housing units, and try to keep up with that demand by providing the supply that's needed. And that's the intent of the urban growth boundary in its broadest sense, is to promote infill within cities, and protect the more rural and farm and forest uses outside those urban growth boundaries. That's the nature of Oregon land use.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to see the additional clarification language like Commissioner Espy was saying.
Yeah, certainly, we can do that. Is that something you would want to see before you make a recommendation, or would you like us to make that change going forward?
I think we can make the change going forward. I'd like to try to make a recommendation on, make a decision tonight on this.
I would second that. I appreciate what Commissioner West's concern is in terms of driving costs up. That's not our intent here. But I do feel like there's been a lot of work put into this. We've got clear and objective standards with an alternate relief valve, as you used. There's ways in which that a developer could take the off-ramp. Given an overlay or given a challenge, they have the opportunity to develop an application to alter the standard. I feel we've done our part. I feel with the clarification with the side entrance, the rear entrance, that meets a typical form for a townhouse development. And I can think of many precedents in the city of Portland where you have developments such as that. I think we move it forward.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. I want to re-clarify our charge tonight.
Correct.
And that is to and I could be wrong. I'm not sure, but what I think Luba told us to do, or y'all to do, was to come back and address the clear and objective standards for this, right? So that's what we're doing.
Correct.
Okay.
So I want to offer just a point of clarification or an opinion. If the code says detached, comma, side entry, or rear entry. Two of those three options are mutually exclusive, side entry and rear entry, so you have to pick one, and in that case, it's implied that you get to pick one of the three, correct?
Yes, but we can make that much more explicit if you like. We can bullet those out and add or you know, we can make it much more clear, and we could even write a sentence that is specific to townhome development if you wanted.
So if you want to eliminate the obligation for townhomes, we would exclude townhomes.
Right.
And then make it more clear that side and rear garages are required for single family, whether they're attached or detached.
Single fam, say it again, would have detached?
Single family can have attached or detached. They just can't load in the front.
Okay, that would.
I mean, if that's the will of the commission, I'm just the scrivener. But if you're done with asking us questions, you should close the public record if you're going to deliberate.
I think that section in reference to detached garages needs to be rewritten so that it's very, very clear that you can have detached garages, but all garages must be side or rear entry. I think that needs to be clarified in the language.
Okay, so now would be a good, I take it that now would be a good time to close the public record. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Close the public record and move on to deliberations. Carry on. Anyone care to make a motion or further discussion? More discussion.
Yeah.
Can I go?
Go for it.
All right. I respect the opinion of the commission, and you know, we're going to go with whatever the commission chooses, but I'm still going to voice my opinion on alleys. My house was built in 2000, and back then, well, it was 99. Back then, it was all snout houses. It was very common to see a 3-car garage with a front door. It was ugly, but back then we were more worried about how good life was than how our house looked from the street. We would pull into the garage, we'd park, we'd go in the backyard, and that's where we would live. And I feel like the codes now have turned it into how good does it look from the street and how unlivable it is, and nobody even cares anymore. By putting an alley in the back, you pretty much eliminate the possibility for someone to have a backyard, because that's the only place you could possibly have a yard, and the space that you could have grass in, you're now driving down, so you're adding 33% pavement where you could have had a yard if you could just get over the fact that you're driving into a snout house. And like the only developer we have in the room right now, as far as I know, as he said, the cost to develop a lot in that manner is 50% more. And in an age where we're trying to build as much affordable housing as possible, I just don't see how it makes any sense. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
I concur. And then the additional cost after.
Or the discussed modifications.
And just, can I summarize what I think the modifications are, and you tell me if this is right?
Yeah.
greater clarity with respect to the language of the location of garages, that they may be detached or attached so long as they are side or rear entry. And that will apply to all housing, including middle housing townhouses, but it won't change the modification provisions that authorizes variation in those standards.
Right.
Is that your motion?
Yep, sounds right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I had to process that for a minute, sorry.
Okay, motion's been made.
I'll second that.
Okay, made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just clarification. That means that we are still having the alleys.
Yes.
Is there consensus on this commission to remove that requirement?
Discussion is currently on the motion that's on the table.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? No? Okay, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
No.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Vice Chair Espy?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. Motion carries. All right, we need to take a break. It's 8:53. Let's come back at 9 o'clock. And we'll carry on with the next item.
So just, sorry,
Sure.
I just want to point out that that is a recommendation. So what staff will do is modify the code, and we will modify the code, and we will issue a decision, or we will not issue a decision?
No, what we will do is present the modification that you just approved in the ordinance that goes to City Commission.
Right.
And
Do we know
they
what
will
date that will
adopt
be?
it. I did, and it's the first meeting in December, I believe, is when we're taking it, so.
Do we know what that date certain is? Before
Yes.
everyone walks out?
Yeah, okay. Okay, give me a second here. That would be December 4th.
So the City Commission will take this up at the December 4th meeting.
Correct.
So that's for the public's benefit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's be back at 9:02. 0002. Legislative hearing for McLoughlin Boulevard enhancements, an update to the transportation system plan. We'll start with the script. A public hearing on a legislative application is scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those codes or laws. Legislative actions involve the adoption or amendment of the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, maps, inventories, and other policy documents that affect the entire city or large portions of it. Legislative actions which affect land use shall begin with a public hearing before the Planning Commission. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission on a legislative action, the City Commission shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposal. Any interested person may provide written or oral testimony on the proposal at or prior to the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, the City Commission may adopt, modify, or reject the legislative proposal, or it may remand the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration. If the decision is to adopt at least some form of the proposal and thereby amend the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, official zoning maps, or some component of those documents, the City Commission decision shall be enacted as an ordinance. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written material received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing to continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. I'll now ask for conflicts of interest disclosures for all the commissioners. We'll start at the left. Commissioner Dole. Any conflicts of interest?
No conflicts.
Okay. Commissioner Laws?
No conflicts of interest.
Commissioner West?
No conflicts of interest.
Vice Chair Espy?
None. No conflicts. No conflicts.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
No conflicts of interest.
Okay. Commissioner LaSalle?
No conflicts of interest.
And I also have no conflict of interest. We'll move to the staff report.
All right.
Mrs. Robinson-Carter?
Thank you. Chair Stoll, Planning Commissioners, you received a longer presentation of the project in September. And so the presentation you'll hear this evening is a little bit of the process for next steps and just a quick overview. I have Dana Webb here, our Public Works Director, and Nick, I blanked out. Yes, thank you. It's 9 o'clock. Nick Rose from Kittleson Associates, who is our consultant, if you have any questions. Let's try. There we go. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is a legislative file. Legislative files, there is no ex parte conversations with legislative files, but you always have to disclose any actual conflict of interest. This is a recommendation to the City Commission, just as you previously did in the last application. So overall, the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan was adopted in 2005, and the first 2 phases were completed. And the third phase, which is the most complicated phase, which involved the viaduct, was pursued this last year really as a conceptual understanding of the alternatives available to add pedestrian and bike access along the shoreline part of 99E McLoughlin Boulevard, as well as a streetscape design for that third phase. So the 2 products that came out and are part of your packet is the results of that alternative analysis and a conceptual approach and a proposed streetscape plan. So those would be added to the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan already adopted as a revised corridor, which was also adopted in the Transportation System Plan. So since we met with you on the September 23rd, there's kind of been two follow-ups. I wanted to provide a little overview. Larry Morton's transmission service kind of exists on the inside curve of McLoughlin Boulevard, and they have a fair amount of existing access points. We had a really great site visit with both Larry Morton and the new owner of the business, and we made sure on the revised plan you'll see additional asterisks that identify both the driveways on 99E as well as the two access bays that are in that kind of that parking area. So as well as a driveway location near 6th Street. So we wanted to make sure that in the adopted plan, it identified all the existing access points that Larry Morton's Transmission Services uses. And in the version that retains parking, the refined design should ensure that all those access points remain. The second piece was a desire to have more information on tree removal and habitat protection in the plan. We met with the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission and the Natural Resource Committee to talk a little bit about approach to habitat, both in the design of the structure as well as the shoreline protection of trees. And in your packet, you'll see it on page 50 of the revised plan. There's additional language that indicates that, and is shown in a future slide of this presentation, that tree retention should be a priority in the next phase of the design, as well as looking into how the structure design can provide habitat for bats, birds, and other animals that are part of the riparian area. So your criteria for approval for this legislative action is our Zone Change and Comprehensive Plan Amendment chapter in 1768, and our Oregon City Comprehensive Plan Goals and Policies and Strategies. Inside the staff report that's attached to your agenda shows the findings for compliance. And this is how the functional way we adopt legislative proposals. So to provide just a real brief, sum it up in plain English, this was a conceptual study that looked at how to provide both pedestrian and bike access along the shoreline and the streetscape improvements. So if the community agrees that a parallel structure should be added to the transportation system plan, that is the long span that our consultant team and Dana Webb will discuss, the Planning Commission should recommend adoption to the City Commission. If the community does not desire to add this concept to the transportation system plan, the Planning Commission should recommend that a parallel structure, which we are identifying as the long span, not be added, and recommend a plan to direct pedestrians and bicycles to Main Street and only adopt the portion of the streetscape plan that are independent of the viaduct structure. The year-long process really only identified one way that bicycles and peds can get access along the shoreline. That is the long span. So really in front of you today as the Planning Commission and your recommendation to the City Commission, do you want to include that alternative and proposed approach into the transportation system plan or not? So your options this evening are to recommend approval of the application to the City Commission, recommend denial and provide those additional directions as I had in the kind of strikeout option, or request additional information from staff and continue to the November 18th Planning Commission meeting. So I'm going to hand it over to our Public Works Director and Nick, and they'll provide just a little bit of background of how they got to the design we have today. And I'm going to hand this over.
Great. Thanks, Christina, and good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Nick Gross. I'm a transportation planner and project manager with Kittleson and Associates. So I think Christina gave a really nice overview and background on the work we've conducted over the past year or more. I'm just going to recap in just very few slides, a little bit more detail on that process. So we kicked this off over a year ago this planning project. It's really two projects in one, which again, Christina framed pretty well. So there is this alternative alignment process and an alternative development that is really that corridor or pathway along McLoughlin. And then the second part is the streetscape enhancements. The first piece here, this is talking about that separated structure. So about 12 months ago, we began evaluating alternatives. We started with a very long list of alternatives, which quickly narrowed down to what we call our preliminary alternative concepts. Those included everything from a floating esplanade to a more elevated pathway, snaking through the historic arch bridge, going under the historic arch bridge, going over the historic arch bridge. The historic arch bridge is one of the challenging points to navigate for anything, both culturally, historically, structurally. Anyway, we narrowed from that long list down to the three most promising alternatives. Each step along the way, we were bringing in additional expertise, whether that be cultural, archaeological, historical, structural, engineering, planning, and bringing in these expertise to continue to refine and learn more about this area. We had a survey conducted through drones and all sorts of additional information brought to the table to really understand what the constraints and challenges are along the shoreline and the sensitivities of that space. Eventually, we narrowed down to what we called the two most promising alternatives and did a very deep dive into more detail and information, and ultimately landed on the long span alternative, which is pictured here in the bottom right of your screen. It's outlined in that kind of blue silhouette. This perspective is somewhere near the Westland High School, I believe, looking back as a rendition of what that would look like. And the long span alternative is really what we believe to be the greatest alternative that really mitigates the sensitivities and challenges of this area. One of the biggest pieces to the recommendation on the long span is just the lack of what we've called just sort of the number of holes in the ground along this very sensitive shoreline area where there are known to be archaeological and cultural sensitivities. So the long span alternative is the recommended alternative for the shared use path element of this project. The next is the streetscape improvements. There we have a concept design layout that I believe is in your packet, but really the notion here with the streetscape improvements is to continue the enhancements that have been implemented and shown here in this aerial north of our study area, north of 10th Street, and that have been implemented as part of that 2005 enhancement plan that you have all adopted and implemented. We're really trying to continue these enhancements through our corridor, so south of 10th Street down to Tumwata Village, and then all the way to the Railroad Avenue and really the tunnel. And those enhancements are really kind of greening the corridor, bringing in the curbs as much as possible while maintaining all freight and motor vehicle access, building out wider sidewalks, increasing trees, providing tuck-in parking, similar to what you see here, kind of in that same existing area where along the historic arch bridge where there is parking on McLoughlin today. And then really just making it a better connection from downtown to the riverfront through better crossings across McLoughlin, better sort of creating a better visibility and sight distance at the existing crossing you have underneath the historic arch bridge. And we even explored a potential undercrossing concept that would utilize the sort of 8th Street stairwell, go underneath the viaduct and provide access down to the dock there. So yeah, the streetscape enhancements, there's much more detail that we can talk about, but for now, I'll leave it at that. And then just a kind of reminder that all of this entire planning process has been informed by a very comprehensive public involvement process as well. We have met with many interested parties. I have a list in front of me here. We've conducted online open houses. We've conducted in-person outreach events. There's a couple data points here of some of the number of inquiries and feedback we received, and along sort of each of those milestones that was presented on that first slide of alternatives, we went out, touched base with the community, got their feedback, and really used that to inform some of the alternative refinement and really the streetscape element to this plan. With that, before we go right into questions and comments, I'll pass it to Dana Webb.
Good evening. Real quick, I just wanted to update you on a couple of grants that we are proposing and submitting for this project. Metro has two different components to their regional flexible funds, and so we have, with a resolution of support from the City Commission, submitted a application that would include the design and construction of the streetscape component of this project, along with transit enhancements along the Line 33 route through Oregon City. So that line goes from the transit center downtown and runs up along the McLoughlin corridor. And so for those that are familiar with the Line 33, there is a proposed change to Line 33, and so it will be kind of swapping, and it will eventually run on McLoughlin, or on Molalla, up 7th and on Molalla. And so as part of that, essentially tying those streetscape improvements on 9090 to enhanced transit along that Line 33. So that one has been submitted. We've been through the first eligibility review, and we have passed that. So we're on preparing our more refined submittal for that, which was submitted on Friday. So we're in the kind of the next step of the review process. We are also working on an application for what's referred to as a Step 2. So that is the same program that funded our Molalla Avenue Streetscape project a few years ago. And in that application, we have asked for project development work for the streetscape, as well as the long span for a type, size, and location review. So really kind of digging in to that bridge structure a little bit more. And so we have submitted both of those. They do overlap a little bit. One asks for design and construction money, one asks for project development. And as we work through this process, we've been coordinating closely with Metro. And so in the event our Step 1 application for design and construction moves forward, then we would amend that Step 2 application. So those are the two grants that are in process related to this. The resolution of support for that Step 2 application goes to City Commission on November 6th for approval. And then just very quickly, the two projects are really amendments to existing projects in the transportation system plan, and essentially in both cases really refine that cost estimate. And so just to kind of share, you know, they're big dollar amounts, but we are not at this time proposing to go back and amend our calculation of our transportation SDC. So although we would, if this proposal is successful, we would adopt these into our TSP, we would not go back and amend the transportation SDC rate to include the full cost of these projects. We would pick that up then the next time we do our transportation SDC methodology update.
All right, thank you. I want just a quick clarifying question on those two grants. One is for design and construction, the other is for development.
So project development, which would just really continue to refine the design.
So development in the context of those grants is not construction?
Correct.
It's design. But we don't call it design, we call it development. I'm sorry. It's two words that seem to be the same
terminology. I believe the Step 2 is for full construction plan. Yeah.
Okay.
So it would get us full construction plans, it just would not get us construction.
Shovel-ready plan, so to speak. Okay, thank you. Okay. Any questions? No? All right, well, that was easy. Any public comment? Okay, thank you.
forgot one question.
Oh, go ahead.
I was wondering if it's going to be painted that pretty fluorescent green that's shown in the picture.
No, that is, I'm not sure how we ended up with blue, but I think there was a yellow and a pink and all sorts of colors to show different milestones, but the blue is just to draw your eye to the structure.
I just couldn't resist that.
Have there been any sort of studies regarding, like, if you put different options, different colors, of the likelihood that a person will choose subconsciously based on the color that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of.
Okay,
no.
that's just a thought that I just thought of. Okay, move on to public comment. Paul Edgar.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. My name is Paul Edgar. I live in Oregon City. I've been very active in transportation issues for over 25 years. And one of my biggest problems is not, I support the long span. I think it's probably the best choice that we could possibly put there. But we're talking about a pedestrian right-of-way that we're creating. It's wide and is envisioned to handle a lot of people. And how are we going to get the people to that pedestrian right-of-way on the other side of McLoughlin? If they come in and park someplace, how do we get them into downtown Oregon City and out to Tumwata Village, or the Riverwalk, which is the eventual pathway out to the falls? I was on the Urban Renewal Commission when we did the original planning. I would like to come back and say there's a major flaw right now in that we need to create an overpass to the Riverwalk where people don't have to hit a crosswalk light. The crosswalk light, hitting that and causing that to happen, will double or triple congestion on McLoughlin Highway 99E. It has that exact potential. That would inhibit businesses. It would change everything. I know that the engineering public works director did a look-see at how to create a overpass over it and maintain a 5% grade. The problem with all of that is that if we go straight, it overlaps actually onto Main Street, but we don't have to go straight. We can even cut down a little bit the height of McLoughlin, but somehow we have to be creative and figure out how to get pedestrians over to the site. Look at Multnomah Falls and see how many people could come. And we have that potential, and it would be fantastic for the city and tourism and for tax base. But right now, we don't have that ability in this plan. And I think it's a critical flaw. I think that we need to come up with a way, even if it says, I had proposed, and I've talked to the parties here, about using the 7th Street right-of-way alleyway to the south of the bridge and coming off, because it's kind of in the center of downtown, and it goes straight up to the elevator. And so if we come up there, maybe we curve around a little bit so that we can gain that 5% grade. But we need to get the people over there and then have them come back over that same route without hitting crosswalk lights right into the business district of downtown Oregon City. This inability to solve that, it's like putting a time bomb into the problem, because if all of a sudden people can't get out to Canby, can be akin to what happens if we had tolling, and we knew that that was going to potentially kill downtown Oregon City because of just diversion. But it's the same type of mindset, is that all of a sudden pedestrians, we're building a pedestrian right-of-way, and pedestrians themselves can stop McLoughlin, the flow of traffic. And I just think it's a critical flaw. I want to implore you to think that out, make that part of an issue that must be resolved. Even the traffic counts that I see posted into there are 1920 or 2022 traffic counts. And vehicle trip generation now has been going up tremendously. At the same time, we're spending money on transit, and the 33 bus line, when it hits Oregon City right now, it usually has 1 or 2 people in it. It maybe picks up a few going up to the college, but coming down, it's amazing. No one uses it. Maybe in the future they might figure out how to use it, but it's pathetic. And now we've got to come up with something. And I just hope you guys figure this out, because I believe it's critical to Oregon City, and we cannot, we got to get them out there, we got to get them back, and we can't have them stopping the traffic flow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff or discussion? Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
I'm not afraid to ask dumb questions. In response to Mr. Edgar's question, sorry, if we were to create a walkway that kind of went next to the existing arch bridge, is it possible to intersect a long span in the middle and provide access there, or does the long span need to be able to sway?
So I'm not sure I fully understand. So are you saying if there were a overpass on McLoughlin?
Right. Right next to the arch bridge, parallel to it, could it intersect the long span in the middle?
The long span will be at the same grade of the road of McLoughlin as it traverses through, or kind of through, the arch column of the historic arch bridge. So
it's much lower.
It will be much lower, yes.
Okay. How about, so that's off the table. What about the underpass? There's somewhat of an underpass next to the courthouse. Is it possible to use that in some way, or improve it, or build something new down there?
Yes, that is a concept that we've explored, that underpass. Earlier I said it would provide a connection down to the dock. The concept that we have developed, and it's very kind of planning level still, is a connection to the long span as well. So you would theoretically be able to go underneath the viaduct near the courthouse and then come back up and connect onto the long span structure.
Without going all the way to either end of it?
Correct.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
And just real briefly, there is a direct pedestrian connection of the long span at the historic arch bridge. So you'll be able to walk from the elevator down 7th Street, cross McLoughlin Boulevard at the existing pedestrian light, and be able to enter the long span.
Yeah, Commissioner Lawson.
Is there a communication, just so that it's preventative, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on just overall what their expectations will be with the forest area ahead of time, so that this project could possibly be successful without any implications?
So my initial thought there is that we do have an environmental expert on the team who is versed in the NEPA world. So the environmental process that will come after this will do a much deeper dive into those considerations. We have so far in this plan tried to prevent and mitigate as much of that as possible. Everything from, again, sort of the pilings into the river or the the risk of that, shading, all sorts of considerations that relate to fish and wildlife habitat along the shoreline edge. But so I'm not sure I'm fully answering your question, but
just that there's some type of communication so that, we're investing in this, in time and consulting and other things, that if we're going forward with the project, that it's successful with no issues with fish and wildlife.
Yeah, I think we can reach out to them.
Yeah. I think one of the things we asked our design team is, this is the red flag point in the process. Like, is this permittable? Not, can you get the permits? Because that's a lot of deep information, but is this plan constructible and permittable? And what we heard is, yes, the approach looks like it is an approach that you can get permits for, but all of that extra work that you get into when you do the NEPA process is really that next phase.
And then there was mention, obviously, about earthquake and erosion. Is there, obviously, there's going to be maintenance on the bridge long term. Is there, a plan on that, or is it just too early on to, where is it that at in the process long term? Mainly earthquake proof, obviously. Maintenance on it long term. Is there an idea of what that's gonna look like in the future?
So on the seismic piece relating to earthquakes, I believe our structural engineer on this project told me that if there is an earthquake, the safest place to be in Oregon City will actually be on this future long span structure. So it will be seismically sound. And then maintenance, so it will be designed to, it will be wide enough for a maintenance vehicle to go out there in the case of an emergency or just sweeping and things like that. It'll also have some kind of, envisioned to have some kind of viewpoints kind of bulb out so that it could maneuver around people or, another vehicle if it needed to. And then we also had lengthy conversations with ODOT about the maintenance and operations of the existing viaduct and how introducing a new structure adjacent to the viaduct was initially a concern for ODOT, and then we sort of adapted the design so that it provides enough clearance in the viaduct area that maintenance vehicles can still sort of traverse down there. It would be some kind of a snooper truck. It's a truck that has a long arm, and you actually would go underneath and inspect the viaduct, and you could even do that from the new structure. So it would actually provide a potential for better maintenance access to the existing viaduct.
Last thing too, is there comparisons right now to any other vertical bridges right now in comparison, just kind of play off of what they're doing, what they did well on it and what they could have done better to improve it? Are there areas in the country right now that you're comparing this project to in some sort?
There are, and I think there's one or two references in our report. The exact location is not coming to mind for me. Our structural engineer lead he rattled off a couple. I think we included some in the plan document. Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Sloganofer.
Sorry. I found the rendering of the underpass in your materials.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see that. I hope it doesn't change as I turn it. What's the height of that compared to 96 flood levels? Would it be underwater? Would it survive a flood?
It would be underwater.
Okay. Would it break off, or do you think it would?
So, as you can probably also see in that rendering, there is no structural support underneath it. So it's really, again, a concept alignment that will need to be further refined in detail in design. So the primary objective, again, was kind of this end-to-end connection of the long span. This additional grade-separated crossing has been explored just more conceptually. We have thought through where it could be supported structurally and intentionally placed it sort of near that outcropping of natural land and rock. But I think it could be supported, but it would, in the chance of a 100-year flood or maybe even less, it would actually be underwater and not passable. And that was something we considered and still thought that it would, for when it is not flooded, it would still provide that grade separated crossing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's something that can be built that could survive, you know, being under that type of water flow at all. In Portland, I know they did a lot of walkways and such, but I think they all float. And I don't know if they're designed to be able to, you know, float above a flood. I know they extended the pilings on a lot of the marinas down there, because before they would just come off the top and float away. So I don't know. It looks like it's definitely not floating. I mean, is something that's removable, almost like a marina dock in case of a flood event, you know, coming up? Could it be more portable and removable and then replaceable? Because I don't think anything underwater is going to live.
Yeah,
especially when logs start crashing into it. There's usually water flow has stuff in it.
Yeah, so, all great comments and things that we would definitely need to continue exploring, that sort of sub-alternative or design element within the bigger project, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner LaSalle.
In regard to floods, I was in the Oregon National Guard in 1964 when we had floods here, and I saw a huge log jam come downriver and hit the Arch Bridge. And how old is that now? 1922 or something like that. That bridge withstood that impact. So I'm sure with modern engineering, this long span would be able to withstand pretty much any flood that might come along.
Okay. Good. So I have a question about seismic. So I understand that a brand new bridge is going to be seismically, that's fine. The center of that brand new bridge goes underneath a 100-year-old concrete bridge. What's the seismic ability of the 100-year-old concrete bridge not collapsing down onto the center of the span and thus collapsing the long span?
Another great question. I don't have an answer.
Okay. So I would suggest that maybe that bridge would not be the best place to be in an earthquake because of the potential of the load going to the weakest part of the bridge in the form of falling concrete. Yeah.
I could just see, it reminds me of the wildfires we had a few years ago where everybody, the big traffic jam in Oregon City. I can just foresee years in the future that they can predict earthquakes. And 35,000 people in Oregon City are all trying to get to the long span.
All right. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. All right. Well, any motions?
To approve. Yeah, GLUA 24 000023.
Second.
Yeah.
Oh.
Second.
Okay. Yeah. Well, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right. Call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Vice Chair Espy?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye.
And so for those following the project, this will be in front of the City Commission tentatively on December 4th.
That's the same meeting as the previous Spark Place, correct?
Yeah, we're just keeping them all together.
All right. So we're at 9:45. We have one more legislative hearing. We have the option of hearing that and probably needing to extend the meeting until 11, or we can continue that to November 18th, correct?
Right, either 18th or the second meeting in November.
Sure. Yep.
Is there anything else on the agenda for November 18th?
For November 18th? No,
yeah,
there is not.
If we were to continue this to that date.
Or November 25th, for that matter.
There is something scheduled for the last meeting in November, yes. For November 25th, we do have an item for that night.
But what is the general nature of that item?
It is it's a master plan for the community college.
Okay.
We're having a meeting anyway.
We're having a meeting anyway, yeah. Okay. So, pleasure of the commission. If you want to extend and have, take care of item 4C tonight, we can do that, or we can continue it to the 18th, which is a replacement meeting. Our next scheduled meeting would be Veterans Day, which we're not going to have. So we're basically pushing that meeting back 1 week. Or we can continue it to the 25th and hope that we have time with the existing item. To when? To the 18th. Okay. Anyone else?
Continue.
Okay, to the 18th. Okay. Do we need a motion for that? Okay. Microphone.
Commissioner LaSalle, is your mic on?
I move to continue item 4C to November 18th, was it? November 18th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded for continuance. Any discussion? No? Okay, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Vice Chair Espy?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. All right, we'll move on to communications.
Yes, so two things. One is I actually had the first reading of the TSP amendment going on November 20th, and the second reading is December 4th.
You are correct, and I'm incorrect. So it'll be November 20th, which is what in the second reading is.
Yeah.
The 4th. So I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thanks. And so then the second item is, so let's see, our next meeting then is November 18th, and we'll have the continued hearing that night. And then we will have a meeting on November 25th. Right now, I don't have anything scheduled for December. And our esteemed Commissioner West will not be here in the month of November. She will have an excused absence. And so if I don't have anything in December, this may be her last meeting as her term is expiring at the end of this year. So if we do have another meeting, then I'll repeat all of this all over again, but I would just like to thank you for your years of volunteer service. And I know that you've been involved with the city in the past as a city commissioner, and I do truly appreciate all the questions that you ask and ask for clarification. And I just thank you for all the work that you've put into the Planning Commission, and we will miss you. But have a fantastic vacation.
Thank you.
All right, any other communications?
Do you know when the construction is to begin in this room for the new acoustics?
I do not.
And when that happens, where will our meetings be held?
That's a fine question. I don't know. I would assume the City Hall in the old commission chambers, but I do not know. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm excited to hear that there's going to be acoustic fixes in here. That's really great.
Yes.
Yeah. Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Will we gain captions?
So you mean on the screen?
Yes.
So the closed captioning is a function of Zoom, that's something that we can turn on.
For the people in here that can't hear at all? Is it possible?
We can turn that on. We can just make that a part of our practice. I think they were doing it.
Screens?
I'm sorry?
It would show up on our screens in here.
It would, yeah. Do you want to try it, Kay?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I didn't know it was as easy as turning it on.
Try more.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that easy.
Well, it might be. Let's see.
Maybe it's
So
laggy.
you should be able to, I think you can see me talking.
Can you convert it to Chinese? In case there was someone Chinese here. Or
I don't know.
Italian?
Commissioner
I saw a bunch
Schlagenhofer.
of languages there.
I would have to add, I don't know.
It's fine, okay.
I actually don't see it showing up right now, so we'll talk to the city recorder, because I know he's done that before in the city commission meeting, so
All right.
we'll figure it out.
Okay, she's working on it. If we stall long enough.
Then we'll have to take a vote to extend the meeting.
We've got 9 minutes.
Okay. Well, we can play with that offline, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That sounds good.
Any further communications? Okay, we're adjourned.